All right, well, why don't we get started? So good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to be hosting this event today on applying to graduate schools in clinical psychology. I'm Debbie Chang. I'm the Director of Fellowships and Public Service Partnerships. The person who has the name Andy Rich is not actually Andy Rich. This is Ashif Hassan, my colleague, who's our Corporate Partnerships Coordinator. And this session will actually be led by two wonderful Colin Powell School psychology alumni, Erah and Elaine Johnson. So Erah graduated from City College in 2018 and is currently a second-year clinical psychology doctoral student at Wichita State University in Kansas. Elaine graduated in 2017 as our salutatorian, and she's currently a third-year clinical psychology doctoral student at Emory University in Atlanta. So applying to graduate school can be really daunting. And one of the best ways to navigate the process is to talk to people who have successfully managed it and are on the other side. We're incredibly fortunate that Erah and Elaine are here to help demystify the process. So we encourage you to ask them as many questions as possible and to remain in touch with them as you go through the application process. So Erah and Elaine, thank you again so much for leading this session, and I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right, cool. So hi everyone, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Okay, it says host disabled, screen sharing.
Ashif, are you able to figure that out?
Let me see if I can try to.
Should be able to.
Let me just make a co-host and see if that'll work.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yes, now I can. Thanks. Okay, so let me just go and present. Can you guys see the screen? Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Also,
really quick before we start, we will send out all of these resources to you guys, the PowerPoint with additional questions to ask faculty, and that faculty will ask you during interviews. So all of this will be given out to you.
Yep. And of course, as Deborah said, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. If you don't get a response, reach out again because school can just be like really, really crazy, but we're always willing to answer your questions. So if you also have any questions during the presentation, you can either, we're gonna have a Q&A session at the end, and we try to leave enough time for that. Or if you like, it's really, really pressing, you want to ask. I can't see anyone. I don't know if you can, Erah, but if you like raise your hand or put it in the chat, we can see it there. Okay. All right. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. We're just going to talk about steps to deciding to get a PhD, the timeline for that, tips we have, kind of going through the process of like applications, post applications, and then talking about what grad school is actually like. And then after, as I said, our Q&A. All right, so, and as we go through this presentation, you'll see a lot of positive affirmations. This is a really hard time for everyone. I know you guys are all in school, and it's been helpful for me to see positive affirmations with the things that I'm doing. So you'll see some thrown throughout the slides, and I hope that it's helpful for you guys. All right, so thinking about wanting to get a PhD. There are different types of PhDs within psychology, and you have the clinical PhD, which is often very research focused. With some, you get clinical training, but often it's very research focused, and you apply to work with a lab. A counseling PhD is similar, but has different focuses in the types of research that you do. So a counseling PhD can be focused on like community-based research, programs and organizations like Head Start, where we're looking at like early school education and success in the community. And your research can be like focused more so on that. And then you have a PsyD program, which focuses mostly on clinical work. And some programs actually are trying to incorporate more research into their PsyD programs. But if you're going for a PsyD program, you want just clinical experience, really. That's what you care about. And that's what you're geared towards. And then you also have a master's in social work, which really focuses on that clinical work too. You can get licensed to be a person who gives counseling. You can also do a different like education degree along with that. I see a lot of people do that, and they are able to like work in schools as counselors, in clinical settings as well. And you can do pretty much the same thing with your master's in licensed clinical social work. And so it's really important to decide which program you feel is best for you. It's definitely okay if you don't know exactly what you want to do. Personally, I went for the PhD because I love teaching. I started teaching at CCNY and through an organization called Peer Health Exchange. I don't know if they still have that organization now, but that's where I started teaching with 9th grade students, and I loved it. And I knew I wanted to continue working with students. So, and I knew I liked research. I hadn't done a lot at that point, but I liked research, and I knew I wanted to do clinical work. So that's why I went for the PhD route. But if you know that you only care about clinical work and you are not feeling research, you don't really care about teaching, that's not really what you want to do, I would definitely consider like looking for programs that target that specific thing, because you will, if you apply to like a heavy research program, you'll be expected to do that research even though you're getting clinical training, but it's going to be hell. It's going to be like really, really rough because it wasn't what you wanted to do in the first place and wasn't what you were passionate about. So I'd really take time to decide which program you feel like is the best route for you, and talk to other people who are doing these programs as well. It's okay, I'll talk about emails later on in the presentation, but definitely reach out to people and talk to them to see like what their experience is like. And you can also apply for different options too. Like I applied to 2 counseling PhD options in addition to the clinical, in addition to the clinical applications. Okay.
Yeah, I really do want to emphasize to know what sort of program you want to get into before you embark on this lifelong journey. I know master's programs sometimes last 2 years, but PhD programs can last up to 6 to 7 years, depending. So really, really, really know what you want. And one thing I forgot to add was, in addition to clinical counseling, clinical PsyD, there's also community PhD programs where if you're not really into clinical work, but you still want to emphasize research in larger settings with communities, that's another option for you to go into as well.
Yeah, that is a really good point. They definitely have like clinical community programs that allow you to do work, especially if you want to do work within like organizations and schools rather than like a hospital. So that's a really good option.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Erah, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. So before you start with your application process, you need to have experience. So what we mean by experience is try to work at a clinic, you know, whether you're working at the front desk or helping them out or even shadowing, just some sort of experience. Have some professional experience, meaning if you're a tutor. I was a tutor for the Sikh department for I think 3 years. So that was sort of my professional experience, as well as TAing. So once you graduate, you can apply for TA positions for general psych and city college. Research, you know, join a lab. You don't have to be team lead on something. You don't have to be the one conducting the study, but as long as you're putting in some sort of effort and helping, that is considered research experience. So ultimately highlight your assets, be diverse in what you can do, because there's this notion that you only get accepted into schools based off of your GRE scores. You need to have the highest of the highest. Frankly speaking, my GRE score wasn't that great. I had my own emotional breakdown when it came to that, but schools look at other things besides your scores. You're not defined by what grade you got in your stats class or experimental psych or general psych. Just as long as you're broadened with all these experiences, and that's all that really matters. You also need your official transcripts, which I recommend depending on when you're going to apply. So if you're applying for next year, you should be ordering the transcripts as soon as possible. And you should already have that if you're applying this year. You also need a personal statement. So these are just highlighting, your journey, what you have been through and how you can contribute to the field of psychology. A CV is sort of an extended version of a resume. I know Elaine has her own website where she helps people, create really good CVs and resumes. So Elaine is a very good resource when it comes to that, if you ever want improvements on these sorts of things. During COVID, some schools are not requiring GRE scores, so it's more accessible. My university isn't looking at GRE scores. So again, experience is what matters. And you also need, depending on the school, 2 to 4 letters of recommendation. And I highly emphasize this, to get a letter of recommendation from someone who you trust and someone who can advocate for you, someone who strongly believes in you and knows that you can do this. Don't go to someone who you didn't really build a connection with and they just have a template for you that they can just give every other student. Really have a good relationship and connection with that person.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think also, like, speaking to the experience part, a lot of students will tell me like, okay, it's so hard to get research experience, and I know it's hard to get like clinical experience at this time, even in COVID, before COVID. But you can be really creative in the things that impact you and lead you to wanting to get a clinical degree. And so things like people have told me they've done like hotlines, like suicide hotlines or trauma hotlines. They've done like work with women with like an organization. And that like gave them experience like working with people. Tutoring, I also did tutoring. And that was also like a good experience. Mentorship, if you can, teaching in any way, even if it's, oh, there's some lines showing up on the screen, but I don't know. Okay. Yeah, those any experience that you can get with working closely with people and children, whether even if it's like working with young children to like teach them to read or things like that. Little experiences here and there that you can use to connect to why you want to research a certain area. All of those can come in handy as you write your personal statements. Right, next slide. Okay, let's see. All right, so our recommended timeline is from June to January. And this is encapsulating thinking about your applications, thinking about schools you want to apply to, talking to people who have already done this, and actually like completing your applications. So in June, we recommend to begin studying for the GRE. And I remember when I started studying, like it was also June for me. And I like delayed it a lot because I had gone to England to do research, and I was just like, okay, I'm doing my work, I'm having fun, study for the GRE where. So it was a very slow process, and I like procrastinated a lot. And I was doing it on my own because I was like, oh, okay, I don't need to pay for a program. If you guys can like pay for or find a program where like you're working with like a tutor or even like having an accountability partner, that would be really helpful in like staying on top of studying. And you can take it slow at first, like start with vocab, always having like flashcards with you. That can be really, really helpful because you need to know those vocabulary words. And you can like, you don't have to like go overboard in June starting. You can do like maybe like 4 hours a week, but I would suggest you guys start in June studying for the GRE if you're applying for the December, January round of that year. And then the next thing is to think about your personal story. So the personal statement is what takes the longest time in any graduate application, because you're putting yourself on paper in a way that has to, speak to the person reading it and stand out above all of the other applications, right? In a way that's unique to you. And so really think about, just don't even like start writing, but think about your personal story. Maybe put post-its on the wall where you can like outline your like timeline of like your life, the things that were important to you and made you want to pursue this degree, or made you want to work with this particular population of people. Kind of, you give yourself like a little think through of what your timeline and personal story is like, and what led you to, boom, I'm going to apply to a PhD or PsyD or whatever it is. And then I would also recommend looking for schools that you would like to apply to. Definitely consider location. Like for me, like location was definitely important. I knew I was not going to survive like in the winters of Michigan, because I'm not a cold weather person, even though I'm coming from New York. And consider like if you want to live in a city, or you're okay with like living in a smaller town. Consider your advisor. That is so important, because like I said, if you're applying to a clinical PhD program, you're applying to work with a lab. Like you are being hired by an advisor, and who you work with, if they're not taking students for that year, you're not getting invited for an interview, because unless they like push your application over to another advisor who's taking students, who's interested in the work that you're doing, then you need to match with an advisor. So I would suggest looking through websites, the college's websites, see what research the professors are doing, see if it aligns with what you're interested in, because you're going to be writing about that in your application. Like, this is what led me to want to work with this person, and I see you're working with this population too, so this is why, oh my gosh, we should work together. And then of course the type of degree. This is a book I know Erah and I both used. It's called The Insider's Guide to Graduate Programs in Clinical and Counseling Psychology. Every year they come out with a new one, but if you have like the version from like a year or two ago, it's okay. But they give you the stats and breakdown of how each program works. And of course, we'll be sending the PowerPoint, so you'll have the link. But they give you a breakdown of how much a program focuses on clinical, how much a program focuses on the clinical training, what kind of clinical training. So there are some schools who do more psychodynamic training. There are some schools who are only behavioral. They're just like, we don't do psychodynamic over here. There are some schools that focus on community-based training. So you'd be placed to do your externships and practicums in schools versus hospitals. So definitely we would suggest taking a look at this book as you consider schools, and like you'll start off with like a broad list of maybe 20 schools that you're interested in applying to, and narrow that down over time.
I'd also like to mention, like, don't limit yourself to, one state. I know when I got into Kansas, I was freaking out because I grew up in New York. I was born and raised in New York City, Queens, and I was filled with a lot of diverse people. And looking into the graduate programs, location was a big deal breaker for me too. I wanted to be in a place that was very diverse, that was rich in different sorts of cultures. And where I ended up in Wichita, I got that. It might not be the biggest city compared to New York, but there is diversity. So if that's important to you, the Insider's Guide also looks into that for you as well. So that's something. I know staying close to home is really great, but I think moving out and, you know, getting this sort of independence was one of the best things that ever happened to me. I grew up in a very, you know, sheltered environment where, you know, family was everything. It's still everything. But, you know, being pushed into the swimming pool without knowing how to swim was sort of an adventure on its own. You get to meet new people, you get to travel, you get to do different things that you couldn't have here. What?
I said learn how to drive.
Yeah, learn how to drive. I'm still on that journey, but Uber still helps.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. Location is, as I said, like very, very important. And I feel like you should have, I definitely applied all over. Somehow I ended up in the furthest state that I applied to. Like I remember applying to like Philly, places in Philly, DC, Jersey, but yeah, I ended up all the way in Atlanta. So, but yeah, don't sell yourself short. I agree with Erah completely. Like something about moving away from home and being on your own and figuring it out on your own, like brings a different type of growth that, yeah, just did not anticipate. As much as you feel like you know about yourself, there's more to learn every single day. All right.
Okay, so July, again, keep focusing on your personal statement. Again, highlight your own diversity. What have you encountered? What have you been through? Obviously, don't make it like a sob story where psychology saved my life, but how can you just contribute to the field? Why are you worth, you know, entering this field? And what were your shortcomings, stuff like that. Also talk to different people in the field. Your professors are your biggest resources. You know, if they got a master's degree or a PhD, ask them, what was your experience like, or what advice do you have, you know, to give to me? And continue studying for the GRE. That's just July, balancing everything at once at this point. August, again, you should narrow down on your research experiences, clinical experiences, and different aspects of your life that you want to highlight. Again, working on your personal statement, start drafting, make an initial draft, just start putting your thoughts onto a piece of paper, whether that's writing it down on a post-it, like Elaine said, or on a Word document. And then soon you'll extract, you know, the irrelevant stuff out or the excessive stuff out, because there are limits to your personal statement. Some schools want maybe 2 pages, other schools want 3 pages, other schools just want 2 questions, 2 short answers. So it really depends on what the school is asking for. And at the same time, still study for the GRE. I know I took a Kaplan class. I took the GRE twice. The second time I took it, I paid for a Kaplan class, and I think it really did help and it improved my score. I know CCNY offers 0.5% off, a discount. I don't know if they're still doing it, but that is also an option.
That's really good. I didn't even know that. That is really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say like at this point, after you've put all your post-its on the wall or like written out all your experiences, as Erah said, like you won't be able to include all of your experiences, but you're gonna pick and pinpoint the ones that you feel like are leading directly and relate directly to the topic of research that you want to go into. So for September, ask for recommendations. You always want to give your recommenders a lot of time to write you a gleaming letter of recommendation. Erah mentioned earlier that you don't want someone who is just gonna like fill out a template that they put out for everyone, because you want your recommendation letter to be unique. It really supplements what you're putting in your personal statement. And I always talk about recommendations with students because it can be very intimidating for them. And one, you should be building relationships with your professors where you can. If you take somebody's class and you find that like, oh, like I really like, you know, their personality, they seem like a great person, asking them questions and building rapport with them, But if you haven't built relationships with your professors, that's okay too. You can still reach out to them for a recommendation letter. There's just a little bit more of a process. And a part of that process is like reaching out to them, explaining that you're applying for these programs and why you are, and asking them to set up a meeting. And in that meeting, talking to them about why you're passionate, the things that you've been doing lately, and asking, of course, this is if they're willing to, you're going to ask them the email, like, okay, will you be willing to write a recommendation? I got an annual class, blah, blah, blah. And then upon meeting with them, kind of going through with them, like what you've been up to, the things you've done so far in your academic career, and kind of making it easier for them by leaving them with like a Word document with bullet points of the things that you would like them to highlight. And you can meet with them more than once. And this is why we suggest asking for these recommendations in September, because you might get some no's as well. People are going through a lot. Professors are going through a lot with like trying to raise families and do school at the same time, and everybody's home at the same time. So it could be really hard for certain people there. And if you get a no, that's okay too. That doesn't mean that it's on you. It could be that they just really don't anticipate that they have the time to. And you want somebody who's gonna have the time to like put in work, put in edits on your recommendation letter, and make it like the most bomb thing ever. Have your draft edited by someone who you either feel like is like a great, like you can maybe take it to the writing center if they're doing that online, or I also look at personal statements too. You can always like email me and I will take a look at it and meet with you and talk through where it is you're kind of going with your letter. Have your CV edited, and then try to take the GRE around September or October if you kind of want to push it back. But I would suggest taking it in September for the first time, so that if you get a score that you feel like, okay, I want to study the vocab more for a while, that gives you some time, another month to take it, because you also have to wait 21 days before you take the GRE again. So give yourself some time by taking it in September. And if you want to take it again, you could take it in October or even November.
Yes, taking the GRE again, it's quite common. Sometimes you get the score and you're not happy with it. It's okay. As long as you study again and do what you have to, that's all that really matters. I know I had to take it again. Again, edit your drafts as needed. So if someone is looking over it and they say, oh, this doesn't make sense, or I think it would be beneficial to incorporate this aspect of your life, get different perspectives. Have someone not in school or in the realm of academia review your letter. Ask a family member, ask a friend, ask any sort of resource you have. And again, use the insider's guide to really help narrow in on what type of graduate program you want to do. I know for my applications, I included PhD, I included PsyD, I also included master's too. And then ultimately, whatever came out of the grad bag, whoever wanted to have me for an interview or accept me, that's where I ended up going. And look for fellowships and scholarships too, to help you with funding or to help you, with traveling expenses. There's a lot of them out there. So that can be a great resource to use too. So November through January. So this is very dependent on the school. This is where you submit all of your applications. Submitting it isn't necessarily a hassle. It's just going to take 20 minutes. You enter your demographic information, your name, where you're from, phone number, all that contact information. You attach your rec letters. You attach your personal statement, you attach your transcript. Your rec letters will be sent through the people who are writing it. So your school will give you a link, you will email that to them, and then they will email it on to the school. So you don't necessarily have to worry about that.
Yeah, some programs also will send the link directly to the professor. So you want to follow up with them, be like, hey, did you see that in your inbox? Because a lot of times they'll go to spam and then the person doesn't get it. So it's a great time to like follow up with your recommenders as well. And just make sure that they are on track.
So now we are on to post applications. We went through the hard stuff. We finally got it in. We can take a breath for a little bit. And now we have to worry about interviews, whether or not, we are going to get a call or not. So I would say prepare for the interview. Sometimes schools will call you a week before you have to fly out, because that's what happened to me. I got notified a week and a half. So I had a week and a half to look up every single thing about the school, like what faculty does what sort of research, what does this program specifically focus on, and like what resources do they have. So find out as much information as you can about the institution and faculties, specifically your advisor and the lab you wanted to work with, and also student life. What do they have to offer? Save up money for traveling. They do not cover flights. Sometimes they don't even cover for your hotel room. Most often, interviewees spend time with the grad students, so they house us. That's what happened to me, and I think that's what happened to Elaine as well, where a grad student picks you up from the airport, they drive you back to their house, you stay on the couch, or if they have an additional room, you stay there for the night or 2 nights. And also have money to purchase appropriate attire. So you want to look presentable, nothing too form-fitting and nothing overly loose. You want to look professional. So those are good little notes. And also practice answering questions. So look into, what sort of questions faculty and the school will ask you, what grad students will ask you, and what you should be asking of them. I sort of prepared a document that highlights everything, research-wise, professional-wise, clinical-wise, like what sort of questions they will be asking you. And I can share that at the end. I think for the sake of time, we should just continue with the slides.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like in my experience, they were able to, like one interview I had, they had a conference hotel. So I was able to stay at the hotel, but I had to pay for my flight, and a grad student didn't pick me up. But there are people have like different ways of doing things. And some will, like for one interview, I had to do like an Airbnb. Like I didn't even stay with a grad student. So people do different things, but I've definitely heard of like, do you stay with a grad student or, but definitely have money put aside for sure. Okay, so the interview begins as soon as you land. And I feel like this is where I wish somebody had told me what the process is like. And so we've kind of spoken a little bit about it. Yeah, so when you land, a grad student will probably either pick you up from the airport, or there's some situations where you take an Uber to the conference hotel. They will give you a list of instructions and how their process works wherever you're doing an interview at. And you generally follow that. But there are many instances where the graduate student will pick you up from the airport. For me, the process was I drove to the conference hotel in a Uber, and then was able to kind of like freshen up. And then the interview lasted an entire weekend. So the Friday, or no, it was the Thursday evening, 2 grad students like picked me and the other people interviewing up. And then we went to dinner with just the lab that I was applying to. And so we had a good time, but you knew you were also being interviewed during that dinner. And then the Friday was a long, day-long interview with 8 people. I interviewed with 8 different faculty members. And then we had a dinner at the director of clinical training, her house. And then the following day, they gave us a tour of the campus, and that was it. So I will say that your interview begins as soon as you are in contact with the people you are interviewing with, whether it's they're picking you up from the airport or picking you up from your hotel. Definitely be bold and be yourself, be confident, and ask questions. You'll definitely get the "do you have questions" like 38 times. And if you can't think of a question like for the grad students, that's okay. but you should always have like a list of like questions in your back pocket to ask like faculty members. They'll definitely ask you as well. So I wouldn't let there be like long periods of silence where you're just like sitting or on your phone or something, because like I said, they're paying attention to how you are presenting yourself at all times, how you're presenting yourself with the other interviewees, how you're presenting yourself with the grad students, and how you are like, how you just behave like in a regular like group setting. And so we put some good foundational questions to ask for faculty, like why, what made you want to like maybe research in this area, what made you want to choose to work at this institution in particular. And also in like, they will always love talking about their research. So if you can ask a question like, oh, I saw that you were doing this, like, what have you considered like working on this or looking at this factor? They will always love to talk about their research. And then some questions for grad students were like maybe even things like, what do you do on your free time here? Like, do you guys like hang out together? Or is it kind of like everybody does their work and just goes home kind of situation? Why did you choose this program specifically? What about this lab like stood out for you? Those are all good questions that you can ask. Okay. And then for part 2, definitely have fun and be yourself, but definitely just keep in mind like how you are presenting yourself to these people. This is my like since I've been in grad school, this is my second round on the other side. And I've definitely seen like interviewees come and like kind of get drunk and like kind of do some weird things, whether it be that they like say weird things to faculty, or like there was this guy that like came up and like he was just like standing and like not saying anything. He would like talk to like one person and then just like stand off to himself. People are paying attention to all of that, and like as grad students, the faculty do come and ask like, okay, so like what did you think of like this interview and things like that. So be you and stay true is what I always tell people. And it'll be nerve-wracking, but definitely just be yourself. Like, don't try to like be anybody else, because you are a unique person. And they want to see you come through, because they're the person that is going to be working, your advisor's person that's going to be working with you, and your lab members are who you're going to see on a regular basis. And you're also interviewing them. You kind of want to get the vibe of the place. If you go there and above your like regular anxieties about just interviewing, you just get this weird vibe, like these people are like not cool with each other, or they're kind of cold or standoffish, pay attention to that too, because this is the environment that you're about to be in for the next 6 years plus. And you want it to be a welcoming and warm environment for you to be able to grow and be creative in. Be proactive, be attentive to things, participate in conversations. I already said don't stay in the corner. It's kind of an experience of like being on all the time. So even if like you're like sitting at the table, like not being on your phone, I would honestly try to put your phone on silent and just like keep it in your bag most of the time, because you don't want to miss things. And you don't want somebody like calling you and like ask a question like, hey, what do you think about this? And you were like on your phone. That would suck.
So typically you will have an informal dinner with the grad students, whether you're flying in the night before or the day after the interview. And you will also have a formal lunch with the faculty in general. And so typically what grad students do is they take you out for dinner, and then they might or might not take you out to a bar. So this is really to see how you act when you are perhaps under the influence, or seeing how you are in casual settings. Are you a little bit too forward? Are you too reserved? They just want to have a sense of, can I work with you? Is this a person who I will feel comfortable with? And I know asking questions and being confident can be hard. I'm a very shy person. And I think the one thing that got me through during the faculty lunch and dinners is there's a chance I'm never going to see these people again. They're going to think whatever they're going to think about me, like, oh, this is a shy girl, or, oh, this girl is weird, or whatever. You're never, or it's a good thing you might see them again, but there's a chance you might not see them. So put yourself out there, do the most that you can do. If you see no one else getting up, be that first person to get up, and you will stand out for a good reason. I remember for my lunch, nobody was getting up. Everybody was huddled towards their grad student that they were housing with. I looked around and I said, Erah, just get the courage and get up. And I got up and I talked to faculty members. So you just have to tell yourself you can do it. And you just have to get everything in you to just get up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm definitely like very shy at first as well. I think something that helped me, always helps me, like before an interview, like listening to like upbeat music, like if Beyonce writes your anthems, listen to her, listen to whatever music like makes you feel upbeat, makes you feel like you're popping, makes you feel beautiful and confident. Because that's important. You want to go out there and you want to like look confident. And if you don't feel confident, still fake it till you make it, because they want to see the real you. Yeah. All right.
So now you did the application, you did the interview. Now you're just waiting at this point. You don't know if you're going to be accepted. You don't know if you're going to be rejected. You don't know if you're going to be on the wait list. So thank you letters. You should always thank the faculty members and the grad students as soon as you're done with the interviews. Just send a quick, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity, or thank you for housing me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to have an interview with you. I really enjoyed talking about so-and-so. They will appreciate it. You might seem that it might be a little like kissing up to them in a way, but they ultimately look at this stuff and they see how invested you are in this program. And when it comes to acceptance letters, some people might call you. I know I got a phone call. Some people might give you a letter in the mail. Some people do both. Rejection letters usually come in first. So rejection letters come in last. So if you feel like you haven't heard from them from a very long time, it can mean you either got rejected or it can mean you're on the wait list. Me personally, I was on the wait list. So it didn't necessarily mean I got in, and it didn't necessarily mean that I got rejected. I had to wait until probably April until I finally got accepted. At first I was crying. I was in that moment where, oh, I'm not good enough. I didn't get in, but wait list does not mean rejection.
Agreed. Yeah. I can't stress the thank you letters enough. Like I was telling Erah the other day, like one student in that just came in, like I remember an advisor telling me like, oh, she was so great, but she didn't send a thank you email. So definitely send those out, send it to the grad people in your lab. You don't have to send to like every single person and like on the faculty, but definitely to your advisor who will be hiring you, and hire like the person like advocating for you, because the advisors, the professors, they get picks. So they like go and sit in a room and they're like, okay, I interviewed 3 students. They know they only have space to take like 4 or 5 depending on the program, and so each advisor will go around and like knowing how many they can take total, each advisor gets to pick an amount of people. So your advisor is going to be like advocating for you, like I read her personal statement or I read his statement and he has these qualities, he will bring these great aspects to the program, he will be training with me. So you really want to give them a thank you letter and a shout out, and as well as the people in the lab. And then also, yeah, the if you don't hear until like way later on, I remember like places that I got rejected to, I didn't hear back from them until like almost like April. But that may mean that you're either on a wait list or you might be rejected. But if you're rejected, it's okay. Like in my round, there were people who had their masters, who had like 5 years of experience and were still like on their second round of applications. So if you're really passionate about it, these programs are super, super competitive, especially like the PhD, because they only have enough money to fully fund like 4 people, 5 people. I remember NYU when I applied, they were accepting 2 people for the year. So these places, unless they're accepting like 100 people, it's very competitive. And if you don't get in the first round, don't quit trying if this is what you really want.
Also, being rejected doesn't mean that you're a bad applicant. It really depends on your research fit.
That's
If
true.
you can work with this lab. So suppose you're really interested in adult populations, but if the advisor you're working with is adult populations with, let's say, borderline personality disorder, but the lab that you chose to apply with works on something completely different, like depression or different forms of disorders, it probably won't be the best fit. So the insider's guide really helps you narrow down on like what they're focusing on and if I can be an exact match with them. That's what ultimately determines, hey, if you're going to get in or not. And also, again, how you act in the interview. In my just last year, there was somebody who had a brilliant application, but the way they were talking to people was coming off as rude and saying, oh, I'm from, this program and I feel like I'm the best. And the advisor didn't ultimately take him because the vibes he was giving off wasn't that great, how he was interacting with other faculty members and other students. Like, you can't just be nice to the person you want to work with. You have to be nice to everybody and work with everybody. So other factors influence, whether or not you get in.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. Okay. Oh. So we included the slide to just talk a little bit about what grad school is like. And I saw this meme recently and I just thought it was funny because it's accurate. But grad school is definitely, as I mentioned before, it's a process of training that really pushes you outside your comfort zone. And for clinical PhD, the hardest thing about grad school, and I think Erah will agree, is balancing multiple things at one time. So there's teaching requirements, there's research requirements, there's clinical requirements, there's coursework requirements that you have to complete. And then if you're also doing like anything like extracurricular, like if you're like mentoring or doing something else, that's also something that's on your plate. So what becomes hard about grad school is balancing and always having something to do within each area, whether there's 4 or 5 areas that you're working on. If you're doing 3 research projects at a time, that's 3 other things within the one area, when there's other categories like assessment and school consultation and things like that. And that's what makes it really, really difficult. But for me, I think the best part about grad school is learning new things about yourself and noticing when you've grown in a way. Like I wasn't terrible at public speaking, but I've become really good at speaking about like my research, or better than I was. And you kind of see yourself growing in this way, like each year after you accomplish something new. And also I feel like the best thing about grad school is also the people, like I said, like your lab members who you're working with, like they're going to be your new school family, especially if you've moved to a new state. And I think one of the good things for me was having a lab that like we just really vibe together. We hang out, we go out to eat, we explore Atlanta together, and it's been really good to manage the stress of doing all of the other requirements that we all have to do.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I know for my first year, even to this day, I still suffer from imposter syndrome. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but imposter syndrome is basically when you feel like you're not good enough. Like, why did they even choose me? I'm not good. I'm not competent enough to be in this program. I have 2 people in my cohort, the people who I got accepted with, they have their master's program. And I feel so intimidated because I'm the only I came straight from undergrad. And sometimes I think I'm not good with this. I don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes I get a score on a quiz or an assignment, which I'm just like, oh, I'm so dumb. I can't handle this. But ultimately, you just have to remind yourself they chose you for a reason. You are good enough. You came straight from undergrad, so that shows potential. Like, hey, at this level, you can do what another person can do at a master's level. And yeah, balancing is really hard, but that doesn't necessarily mean say bye-bye to your social life. You can still go out to dinner with your friends, have one day where you just relax. I take one day off because I can't just work, and be a workhorse. You need to take care of yourself in that process as well. So it is the best and worst times. It's kind of like undergrad, but kicked up 1,000%, if that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. And I agree with you, Era. The imposter syndrome is real. And I feel like for me, that's what started the positive affirmations things. Like I'll just post positive affirmations everywhere because you've got to remind yourself the whole way that like you're here to learn. It's okay to make a mistake. You're not like the worst. Like I also came straight from undergrad basically, and like other people were older than me. And yeah, it's difficult, and that feeling of like, am I doing enough? There's always something else to do, and I'm not doing enough is always there. But you kind of just like push through it by affirming yourself and like reminding yourself that like you're here for a reason. So I agree with that. All right. Okay, so questions, comments, concerns, feelings. We want this time to be a Q&A for you guys. I know we wanted to end a little bit earlier, but I'm personally happy to stay a little bit over if you guys have more questions. But yeah, this time is for you guys. So I'll stop sharing now. And if you guys have any questions, please go ahead.
Someone asked, how many schools did each of you apply to? So someone has told me that you should only apply to 10 because they look at how many schools you applied to. I don't know how much I agree with that. I think I applied to 8 because towards the end I was losing hope. So I was just barely at the end of the tunnel. So I applied to 8 personally. I got into 2. One was a very expensive school in California, it was private. And then the other one was Wichita State University. So I chose the cheaper alternative.
Yeah, I would also say that, so they definitely ask you in your interviews, oh, what other schools are you interviewing for? And so they will ask about that. But I think even more so is the money. Like these applications are like $80 a piece to $100 a piece. So you have to put money aside for that too. And I also only applied, I think I applied for like 9 or 10. And I also did like Erah where I applied for some PhD, some counseling, and like I applied for 1 master's program. So I also ended up with 2 interviews and I got into the master's program. But yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say there's one portal that has a lot of institutions in it already. I don't know, PsycDAS or something. I don't know what it's called, but your first application will probably be 90 and every additional application, PsycCast, yes, thank you. And I think every additional application is probably 20 to 30. I'm not sure. It's been 2 years for me, but yeah, it's a cheaper alternative because everything is just clumped up there and all your applications are sent at once.
I wish I knew about that. I didn't. Definitely a good one. Yeah, and you definitely.
Hi, Elaine and Eva, can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just wondering how you thought the COVID-19, the crisis would change the interview process for this upcoming cycle. If it would be the same, do you think, or is it going to be more like remote?
That is a great question. My university is doing all virtual. So it'll be, interviews will be through Zoom. The schedule will be the same where there will be breakout sessions. And I think I've heard a lot of other universities are doing that. That as far as I know.
Yeah, my university hasn't said what they're doing yet. I know some people are considering like having interviewees come like maybe like 3 at a time, or just doing virtual because they will have to like board the people, the interviewees. So I'm not sure. I feel like it might be easiest maybe to do a virtual interview as well, but my university hasn't said, and I'm not sure at all. But I would definitely check the website the school's websites, because they're probably going to try to think of different things to do for people.
Thanks.
Someone asked, yeah, no problem. Someone also asked, what sorts of scholarships did you guys apply for? I applied for loans through financial aid. The best part of being an undergrad was I got paid to go to college. And Seek also helped with that too. But in grad school, you kind of have to take out loan money. And it also depends on how many stipends you're getting or the amount of stipends your school is giving you. I know Elaine particularly gets a lot. You're good. My school doesn't let us live, I guess, fruitfully. It's enough to get us by. But yeah, you have to take out loans. It's pretty much a given.
Yeah, someone had asked, like, is it fully funded? And most programs, PhD programs, are fully funded, but still, even though they give you a stipend, it may not be like the most livable one, depending on like what city you're in. Like, I know Boston like offered a stipend, but like living in Boston is like ridiculously expensive. But I applied for the Ford Foundation Fellowship, the Soros Fellowship. There are Mellon Mays fellowships that you can apply for graduate school as well. And there are a few others. I can include a link of a list of some. And also, if you check the website for the school that you're applying to, sometimes they have links to fellowships that you can apply for too. And they have in-house fellowships. Like within my university, I'm a George Woodruff Fellow, and that one was like you could only apply to as like an Emory student or be nominated for as an Emory student. So they have certain ones within the university that you may be applying to. So definitely check their site for financial aid stuff too. And many people go the route of assistantships too, which will give you funding.
How do you recommend finding experience opportunities? Starting from school is a great first step. I know the Seek program is always looking for tutors. If you want to tutor something, a subject, that's a way to go. You can work at the front desk at the Seek office. If nobody's there, you can kind of sprinkle that onto your resume. I was a front desk receptionist. You can join labs that have a clinical focus. So it's not just really heavy research based, but if someone's working with a clinical population, I know there was a professor, Professor Erickson, maybe, he worked with borderline personality patients. And I put that on my CV, like, although I don't have, full clinical experience, I worked in a lab that dealt with clinical populations. So that's a way to kind of, tweak the system a bit. I know with COVID, it's going to be extremely hard finding opportunities, but whatever you can virtually, that's also a given too.
Yeah, agreed. Also, if you're doing your own like outreach work, like with an organization, if you're doing volunteer work to help further like a women's organization or something of that sort, that's experience too, because you're working with people. I had mentioned before, like doing like a suicide hotline, if possible, you have to go through training for that. And that's something that you can talk about. And any like volunteer opportunity. I did a internship at the Child Mind Institute, and I don't know if they're offering that in person again, but you can check the Child Mind Institute because they offer clinical experience where you get training and working with young kids. And that was really influential for me for deciding to go to grad school. So you can check there as well.
Also, if you want to work in medical settings, so integrated behavioral health, you can volunteer at a hospital and work at the emergency room. That can also give you a one-up on your interview or CV saying, hey, I have experience working with, geriatric people or children at hospitals. And that can allow me to be a good asset for your team because I know what it's like to be in that population. So.
Yeah, and someone asked, did your research experience prior to grad school closely match your grad school research interests? Yes, they did, and no. It's okay to be interested in a number of things, but you also kind of want to have like a general interest too. So like mines were definitely all over the place. Like I did some research in trauma, I did some research in applied trauma and law, and I did attention and obesity. So you should at least have something that is like close to the lab that you are applying to. So I was able to tie in the work that I did at least one lab to the school that I'm applying to. But even if you're doing things that like maybe like differing, you can sometimes relate them as well still. So like even if you're doing something like law related, like I'm interested in public policy, like as a Colin Powell fellow, like I did a lot of work with like organizations. And so I kind of tied like my interest in attention in college students and academic success to public policy work and law as well. So you can like, it doesn't have to be like closely related, but you can like do make yourself kind of like well-rounded and find a way to like tie them together.
Yeah, my research interests are very broad. It includes like looking at things or behaviors from a very cultural perspective. And I felt like I could incorporate that into any lab. Specifically, I also like the parent-child dyad, or how one relationship influences the other, and how a child develops because of a specific parenting style or because of their upbringing. So my lab focuses on that to an extent. So it matches and it doesn't match. You have the freedom to choose what you want to do, but ultimately, if your research interests align, it can make your process in grad school so much easier, because when you work on your master's thesis or your dissertation, your advisor is ultimately the expert on this field, and they can help guide you and give you every resource you need to get to where you want to be.
Also,
So, yeah.
if you like get in a lab and you say, oh, I'm interested in nutrition, and your advisor only has like data on depression, like it can be really hard for you to kind of like, and that's why the advisor advisee match is like really important, because you can get really held up in like finishing your dissertation if you have to go and collect like completely different data set rather than to adding on what is already there. And so I think also it's important when you look at professors, what they're doing, they have lab websites, see what direction their research is taking. If they're going into like working with the gut microbiome or going into like some other area, it's okay if your research doesn't exactly match that, but if you're okay with it going into that direction and have things to add on, that can make you a really good applicant, a really strong applicant as well.
How intense are the exams and classes in grad school? What are the best ways to study for exams? So in my experience, there are no multiple choices anymore. It's literally short answers and essays. Grad school is all about critically thinking. It's not about, what is this definition or what is that definition? It's more of an application. How can you apply this theory to this population or to, this disorder?
Yep.
So yeah,
that was actually one of the hardest transitions for me, because I was so used to like the multiple choice questions from CCNY's psych tests, and this was more so like these classes are like they don't really do exams, they do a lot of papers and like discussion or proposing of research. But if there is an exam, it's mostly like what the professor has talked about in their application of a theory or their assessment, and you kind of like giving your own in essay format, your own like interpretation of what that is, and they're looking for like what they've told you, rather than like if you were doing bio and you had to like memorize like parts of the brain. Someone asked, are you both looking to teach and research after finishing your degree? I know I love teaching. I like research. I feel like I would like it to be a part of like my career, but I love teaching and clinical work a lot more. So I feel like I would do like teaching and clinical work and then some research like on the over on the side as well. What about you, Erah?
my ultimate goal is academia. Because I'm in my second year, I haven't been able to work in the clinic. Usually clinical work is in our third year. So maybe once I start working in the clinic, I'll have an interest. But right now I really love teaching. And also, if you're in a clinical psych program and you want to do academia, if that's the route you want to go to, in addition to coursework, clinical work, teaching, you have to focus on publications. You have to really do research and get your name on a lot of posters, go to different conferences, and work on different sorts of manuscripts and publications. So that's its own little journey. And it makes PhD life extremely difficult because you can't really balance your time. You have to do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So that's its own little journey to embark on. But ultimately, yeah, I would want to go into academia, and I think it's worth it.
Okay. I'm seeing. I agree. I feel like it is worth it too. And even if you're not going in knowing you want to do like a lot of research, it's still useful to get this experience because you can apply to a job. Having like a PhD like really opens that door where you have this experience and you can apply to a job where you don't have to like lead a lab, but you're still doing research, and that's valuable as well, and can mentor students in research. Are you both looking to? Okay. I received a BA in psychology, and I don't think that you have to have particularly an complete academic background in psychology. You should take some classes. And somebody also asked, can experience compensate for not having an academic background in psychology? I will say that it does. It definitely does. If you're in like a neuroscience major, but you've been like working in a hospital, gaining experience with like psychology related things and have that to talk about and apply that to why you want to research this particular thing or work with this particular population, that definitely can work for you.
I had a BS, but that was because I was pre-med until my senior year of undergrad in CCNY. My journey in like going into grad school, psychology, clinical psych was a very complicated journey. I started off in pre-med, then I was like, this is not the route for me. I really am not passionate about this. And then I switched in my last year. So that's how I ended up getting my BS.
Yeah, so you definitely don't have to have like all your classes. And I came in as a bio major, but I switched like in my second year to psychology. So I had more classes and like I was tutoring psych, but yeah, you definitely don't have to. Everybody's journey is different.
Yeah.
Someone said, can you elaborate a little about clinical? What sorts of things you do? Okay, so I work with, sorry for the email sounds if you're hearing them. I work with high school students and adults who have anxiety and depression, as well as other anxiety related disorders or personality disorders like borderline or OCD. You have like many times you start off in a training clinic, and so you work with individuals through there, and then you do external practicum where you get specialty in like other areas. So like you can work with kids in a school, or you can work with people who have depression resistant, who are depression resistant or treatment resistant for depression, or specifically at the VA or with trauma. You can work in like different areas. But I started out working in the training clinic at Emory, and I work mostly with kids, individuals who have anxiety and depression, with some parent training work in there. So I'm interested in working with families. So I do school consultation, where I work with the family to help the child succeed in school, behaviorally and academically. And then I work with some high school students as well, some individuals who have autism, and other behavioral disorders like or that affect school. So anxiety, if it's anxiety related, or other things like that.
Yeah, also clinical work doesn't necessarily mean like just, you being the therapist. It's also giving assessments. So you're giving like the BDI, Beck's Depression Inventory, or the BAI. You're giving different sorts of questionnaires to them that they can fill out, so you can have an idea what we can talk about going forward. There's assessments, there's therapy. In my school particularly, there's a lot of court orders. So it's from the court. The parents have been, been brought in because their child is being separated from them. They want custody. They're going through some things. So those are mostly the cases that we work with.
I see a few people have mentioned the KSAC program, which I believe is like a counseling program through CCNY. Is that correct? Okay, so yeah, I remember reading a little bit about that. I don't think that the BA/MA program plus the KSAC program would complicate your track to a PhD in psychology. That would give you more experience. And again, like as I hope you guys like take from this that you don't have to be like, your experience really matters. So even if you're coming from, even if you were doing engineering for a while, your experience in why you wanted to work with a particular population and get a degree in clinical psychology, whatever it is really important. And how you apply your experiences in your personal statement really matters. So I don't think it would complicate.
Also, before we get into the next question, which it sort of ties in, I forgot to mention one of the most important things. When you look into graduate school programs, make sure it's APA accredited.
Yeah.
What this means is that there are certain programs that are funded and meet criteria for APA, American Psychological Association standards. And sometimes if you are not in a program that's not APA accredited, you might not get hired for positions because they'll be like, well, you didn't meet these sorts of standards. And if you just Google in APA accredited schools, it'll give you a list of every single school, every single program, PsyD, PhD, and all across the nation, even in Canada as well. If you want to go to Canada, what schools are APA accredited and what are not. So that's a useful resource to go to as well.
Agreed. I know we only have until 3:20 to answer questions. So I'll say again, if you guys have more, if we don't get to everything, please email me or Erah. We are always happy to meet with you over Zoom and talk about the process. And so I see Kathy. I'm not so sure about the KSAC to BA and MA program. I would love to talk to you more about it. And kind of talk through like maybe like what's the best route for you based on like what each program is offering, because I'm not completely like aware of everything the KSAC program offers. It was a pleasure to talk with you guys as well. Someone asked, I want to focus more on patient and oriented, such as working in a hospital. Would you say PsyD is better for that? Yes, if you're looking, and again, like definitely check the insider's guide. If you're wanting to work with like populations with like more severe disorders like schizophrenia, you want to get that hospital experience, then perhaps a PsyD program focusing on, you want to look at the types of externship experiences that you'll get at the school. And so if you see that they have opportunities for you to get experiences in these hospitals, then definitely a PsyD program would be good. But there are also PhD programs in areas where you get a balance of research and clinical, and they have externship or training opportunities within their own in-house training that give you experience in like their hospitals. If they have like maybe like Philadelphia, I don't know for sure, but like I know Penn State like has a lot of opportunities because they have a lot of different hospitals and organizations and affiliations. So definitely check for their externship opportunities.
Also, clinical programs that have labs focused on integrated behavioral health, like working in different sorts of medical settings, that's also an option if you don't want to do PsyD and you want to do clinical, or you can just go strictly with the PsyD. So either or works. It ultimately just depends on you and different factors like location, finances.
And I'll put my email in the box for people. We had put it on the first slide, but I'll put my email for you guys. Okay, that didn't work properly.
I mentioned my email on the chat in case you guys have any questions. I will also email you the questions faculty will be asking you guys during interview day.
Well, thank you so much, Erah and Elaine. This was super, super helpful. So to everyone who's still on here, we will share the recording as well as the document that I just put in the chat that Alex shared with the Insider's Guide and anything else that's relevant. You know, Erah and Elaine, if you want to pass on anything to us, we can send it out to the group. So thank you again so much for your time and wisdom and advice. And to all those who attended, I hope you stay in touch with Erah and Elaine because clearly they are fountains of knowledge. So, so thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. So glad.
Thanks.